So today I'm going to talk to you about water features that I have in my garden at Grassy Bottom, and a little bit about the history of those as well and how I've come about them. And I think we'll start with this one as we're near to this, and this is what I call the wildlife dip pools. So just over a year ago I built this, and originally this was a border that went under the Corylus avellana, which is the witch hazel there, and I had to think about this because I know that ponds are not really great to put underneath trees because of the leaf fall, and we can show you exactly why that is the case. This is now full of leaves. Now I'm going to get these out. I've delayed this year because time's got away from me, so I've not really cleaned it out, but I am going to clean that out in the next month or so. And I don't want to leave them in there too long, because what they'll do is they'll break down and they'll almost form soil themselves in the bottom of the pool, and I don't want that. This is a wildlife pool, although that wouldn't hurt for that to be there. Now, originally, as I said, it was a border. It was part of this border, and this is the boardwalk border. Now, you're going to have to imagine this in full growth, and if you look back at some of my previous videos, you will see that this is quite well surrounded by lots of plant growth. Whereas at the moment, it's January, beginning of January, or the first week in January, and it's not really got a lot of plant growth there. But they will come up. So what I did was I dug out 2 different size shallow pools here into the soil. And I laid carpet in there and then put a plastic liner in. And it's not the best liner, to be quite honest. I would prefer the better quality ones, but at the time I could only get hold of the one I got. But it's fine. So in the bottom of it, as you can probably just make out in the water there, there's loads of gravel, and that gravel just is a continuation from there. And the original idea was that I wanted wildlife to get in and out of this pool these pools without any problem at all. Should they fall in, there wouldn't be a problem there. So that's how it was designed. So this very slope here is quite safe. And I set about that when this was still the lawn coming down to the gravel. Since then, we've built this section, which I think looks a lot better. So here's some more of that section, couple of steps there. Really, these are just to get myself down to this section here where I can stand. Now, the wildlife can still get in here. There's not a problem there. They can come in either side. They can come in from the back. Depends what it is. As I've pointed out before, this has had a tawny owl bathing in it. And that was nice to see. In fact, it was fantastic. It's what I'd hoped for, because I do call it the wildlife dip pools. Now, when I do things, I like to do them in odd numbers. If there's not just a singular, then it has to be odd numbers. And in this case, it had to be 3. Originally, I'd intended to put 3 of those pools in. But it worked out better for me to use the dustbin as one of the pools. And that's worked quite well, actually, because I get a lot of blackbirds jumping off those little rocks behind it and jumping in there and bathing. Well, when the leaves are not there, which they are at the minute. But we'll take those out and they'll be at it again. And they'll still bathe in that. They won't be bothered about those leaves. Any bit of water brings wildlife in. So that is the wildlife dip pools. And over the time, I embellished it. I did different bits around it, put in stone around it, as you can see, planted around it, and bit by bit, I've changed little bits of planting. Now, where those pebbles are, there, that is the lowest point in this pond, and I needed it to be able to overflow. And if it's going to overflow, as they do, and especially at the moment we're getting so much rain, these ponds will overflow. You need to kind of guide that as to where you want it to go. So I guided it to the little stumpy thing in the background there, which is a Rheum palmatum, and that will take water. And I've got 1 or 2 other water-loving plants behind it, so should it get to them, it's fine as well. They'll all take the wet conditions, so bear that in mind when you're putting a pond in. Just make sure you've got somewhere for it to flow out to, and make sure it's not flowing towards your house. It's an easy mistake to make, and a rookie mistake, that you don't put this overflow to go in the direction you require it to do. So I fixed that pretty early on, and it was part of the initial digging out. And actually, when I dug the bigger pond, the one on the right there, those pebbles, that was a channel that was dug through. So those pebbles actually sit in the channel. So when it overfills, it goes down to it. So that's the wildlife dip pools. Now, while we're here, we might as well mention the dustbin, because just having a dustbin like this is one of the old dustbins you would have had back in the day. I think these came out in the 80s. Well, when I say they came out, they stopped using them in the 80s, and we moved to plastic bins, which isn't great. The metal bins were brilliant, but as a result, we now have an excess of old metal bins around, and people sell them and you can buy them. So a dustbin makes a fantastic water feature. Now, I wouldn't want to put any plants into that, but it's great for birds to bathe in, and insects to drop on, and bees to drop on. A good idea possibly would be to put yourself a rock into the middle, or a brick, or something that stands above the water. Oh, as we speak, look at that. That's just come on. There's not even any sun. That little water fountain suddenly kicked in next to Donald. That's amazing. And that's another thing that I should mention. You should get one of these little things. It aerates it. And just behind it, in the other pond or pool, I've got a water plant which aerates it. So there's not a problem. But on this side, there isn't one. And that does that. So let's go back to the dustbin. So yes, put yourself some sort of a brick or something, so that if something does get into there and can't get back out, then the safety margin is the brick. Now, obviously, if it's in the middle, it can't still get out. But the reason I say put a brick in the middle is because birds will jump on it, and they will take water like that. And if you really want to protect any insects dropping onto there, then just put some gravel in there and just make it a very, very shallow water feature rather than a deeper one as it is there. So that's a couple of my own water features that I've got that are looking really good. And I've been happy with this water feature forever. In fact, since the day I put it in, even when I dug the initial holes, it looked really nice. And we get to view it from the back as well. And at the back there, you can see the black sleepers that I've put in, and the York slabs and the gravel, etc. And it all looks really nice. It's all coherent. All works as a oneer. So that is quite an achievable and easy type of water feature you could put into your own garden. You've only got to dig a small one, like the one where Donald is, where the little plastic duck is. You could simply dig a little feature like that into your garden, use some plastic and fill that up so you haven't got a massive pond, because we all worry about kids dropping in them. Well, to be quite honest, if they dropped in this one, they'd probably hurt themselves more than anything, because it's that shallow, it's not that deep. So these things bring in wildlife, as I've said, and frogs and hedgehogs, and if you're lucky enough, newts, they'd come into it, and that'd be brilliant. I'd love to get some newts into here, but I don't think I will. But you never know, somebody might drop one in there one day. So it looks good from all different angles, and it looks good from up at the house as well. Now this is another feature, and this is a great feature, this, and this would have been a lovely water container, and when I bought it 3 years ago, I never knew if it held water, and then I discovered actually it doesn't hold water at all, because the rusty bits are where it's rusted too far and the water gets out there. So I've used it a bit more cleverly like this. So although it would have made a wonderful water feature, it's not. It's now used in this border, and I think actually that's probably more attractive and a more better use for it. So this is a cow trough, or was used for cows. And it was no longer any good for the cows because it had sprung several leaks around it, as they do over time. But it's a lovely old one that I fancied having in the garden. I knew it wouldn't be any good as a drinker, but it would nevertheless make a fantastic planter, which it has done. And we've got asters, I've got Hackanachoa in there, and one or two other little plants that are in there that I can't remember. It's winter. But anyway, that would make, if you had one of these, you could make a lovely water feature out of that. But in this case, as I said, it leaks, so it's no good as a water feature. Now, if you stick with me, I will show you one that has turned into a water feature that you might like a bit later on in the film. You can buy these from any farm supplier. One of the biggest in England is a company called Mole, as in the animal mole. And they will supply you these. They're not cheap, but they're well worth having. because what you can also do with them, you can use it as a water butt or a water container, so that you can dip your watering cans into and use it like that as well as a drinker for the animals or the birds, or a water feature, which would be quite nice. I wouldn't really use it for wildlife, because it's difficult to put anything in there for safety, really. And what you really need to do, and I've done it at a previous address and I've not brought it here, is I had the very same one there, and what I did was I put some bricks in. So imagine that soil isn't there, it's water. I put 3 or 4 bricks underneath, and I put a grid on to the top of it, and then it was about 2 inches below the surface of the water, so if anything did drop in, it wouldn't drown, and the hope was that I would find them and be able to rescue them, or over time they'd get out themselves. So most people will have access to something like this, and this is what is really they call it a Straddle Stone or a Straddle Stone, I can't remember exactly which one, but these are easily findable and buyable. This one is a modern form of it. It's not an original. If it was, it would be worth something like £300 or £400. This is just a concrete cast one, and I actually found this in a garden that was abandoned, basically, so I took it. But this is fantastic. We get pigeons in this all the time, and they're always bathing in this, so it's definitely worth trying to find one of these. And it's just really a bird bath, but it's nice. Now, another good one that I'd recommend you to try and find are these ones here, and these are actually, usually you'd find these up in the loft, and I'm trying to think what they were used for. They're what they call header tanks. So if you don't know what a header tank is, it's just look it up. I'm not going to go into the complexities of what a header tank is and what it does, but lots of houses had these. This is more the common type that they would have had, and this one is rather a nice one that I came across and I bought, and I've actually turned it into this water feature. So this is a cracking water feature as well, and it has a tap there. There's a pump in there, as you can see from the wires. So this one is just sat here for the winter and out of the way. But it's fantastic. So when the water comes through that tap, it's pushed up by a pump, it falls into the container below it, which is pretty as well, or good looking, and it makes a lovely sound. And that's what water's good for as well, for making cracking sounds. And I like it. I like to hear water in a garden. So that was made by myself. Obviously, I bought the bottom section, and then I had these pipes cut specifically to this size. I came across the old tap, and I put the tap on top of there, and that screws on, and there's a little plastic pipe runs through that down to the pump in the bottom there, and then it just pumps water. It's got a plug on it, as you can see there. That just gets plugged in, and off it goes. That is something else that makes it really good water features, and to be honest with you, I don't use these anymore. And as you see, they contain water, and it looks fantastic. So I just leave those for the minute. I don't know what I'll do with them long term. They are sinks, as you can see. They're not butler's sinks, as people call them. They are actually called Belfast sinks, and you can pick those up quite easily in a lot of reclamation places. Don't pay too much for them, because you shouldn't have to. Now, this was a cracking find. This, believe it or not, was used really as a platform on the farm. They used to have a bit of wood on it, and they used to mix chemicals up on it. And it was wasted, and I thought, my God, why would you waste something like this? So, as you can see, I now used it as a water butt, and it contains a lot of water, as you can see. It's a bit of a mess at the minute. I mean, we've had so much water at the moment, you don't know what to do for the best. So the reason for that little bit there is I stand my plant pots on it. So when I water plant pots, you water onto the top of them, and any excess water goes straight back into this section here. So you're not wasting any. Now that looks beautiful. It's massive. It must be 2.5, 3 foot tall, that. Quite a sized container. But look at the one next to it. Horrible, plastic, horrible thing. But does its job at the moment. I hope to change that over time. But for now, we'll stick with it. Now this is an old beer barrel, I believe, and it just contains a bit of water. I don't really use it for much. What I use it for more than anything is to plunge plant pots that are dry. I stick them in there, and then they soak up and take up the water. which is really good. And here we have like, it looks like a witch's oil, boil, toil and trouble type pot, but it's brilliant. It can be used for all sorts of water features, and I can use it for planting should I wish. And although I can't use that as a water feature, because for obvious reasons at the bottom, there's a big hole in it. There's a hole in my bucket dealyzer. I can't use it for that. If you had a newer one, or one without a hole, they make cracking little water features. And interesting ones as well. You could put 1 or 2 little water plants into that, stick it into the corner of a garden somewhere, and that would look equally as nice. So, let's move on to the next one. So the next one I'm going to take you up to, and the final one I think, will be what I think is my favourite feature, my favourite water feature. And this is the one that I said had some type of animal drinking out of it, obviously, as they always do. And the last one to use this one was a pair of donkeys. This was up in a field, was no longer required, taken away. The donkeys had gone by then. And I rescued it. Now, the beauty of this one is I've got this in here. I'll put the name of this one up on screen for you. It's not one I'd recommend you get. Not one I'd recommend you put in the pond either. I'll show you a close-up. But if you can keep it contained, it's fine. It is a very, very aggressive spreader should it get into the garden. But we'll put the name on screen for you. And then there's this, which is a water lily, one called Nymphea. Very small one. Obviously, it should have died back by now. We should have had lots of frost by now, and that would have died back in and then come back up in the spring. But it seems to have survived. I don't think it'll survive much longer. You can see it's blackening out now, and that'll die away and then start growing again once the weather warms up. And what I've put behind it is this pump, and it is an original one that I bought on the internet. I've already got another one that was original from the 1800s, and I suspect this is about the same time, and it would have been used to pump up water from a well. And they use these a lot in houses, well, houses that didn't have internal water at that time. People would share the same pump, I assume. I assume they shared the same pump. Anybody knows, let me know. But this makes a cracking water feature. I love it. It has to be my favourite. And this is the one where I changed this border completely, and it looks way better for it. It originally used to sit between here, it's now sat back there, and it looks a lot better, especially when you sit in this area in the summer, and that looks lovely. So there you go, there's the water features I use. Now I've just spotted another one, so we'll just give you another idea of what you could do with them. And this is what they call a dolly tub, the old dolly tub where they wash the clothes. And as you can see here, I've used it here, and I've just sat it here. And the reason I sat it here was to put that dustbin lid on to water the birds. Now obviously it's full of leaves because of the hedge behind it. And I did some edge clipping and forgot to clear it out. But I will clear that out as we get the spring tidy up coming in. I will start working on all these again and clear that out. But it makes a fantastic little water feature for the birds, as you can see. And then I said I would end this a while ago. I haven't ended it yet, have I? We're still here. We'll end it with this one. And this is just your traditional type of bird bath that you can buy in most garden centres. This one, I cannot remember where I bought this one actually, but it's lovely. And it's just sat next to the bamboo, and it does a good job. I see blackbirds on it all the time and pigeons on it all the time drinking out of it. And that's what it's intended for. So there you go. A little talk on my garden water features and what I've created. And I would urge you to try and come up with something original. Think outside the box. Come up with some original idea. There's so many different ideas you can use and so many different containers that you can use to achieve this. And remember, water's good for wildlife. It's good for sound if you can get some sort of a fountain into there or waterfall, and it's good for that. It's relaxing, and it's just generally nice to have in your garden. And as I've said, water always, oh look, I'm right on cue. The fountain started again. There you go, it must know I'm here. And that's the solar one. So it just, as soon as a bit of power goes into it, obviously it starts off. So hopefully you can pick a few ideas out of that for yourselves and try and create yourselves your own unique and individual water feature. Talk to you later. Ta-da!